about how do we move forward
Yes.
after experiencing something like that?
For sure. I think most of us have never seen this in our lifetime, so it's definitely a new adventure, a new experience. I think it's very important, though, that we begin to move forward with our mental health, because languishing and staying in that fear and anxiety is just going to perpetuate that fear and anxiety. So it's really important to be informed, take the necessary precautions that you can to protect yourself and your family. However, it is time to move forward. Hopefully the pandemic will eventually be a distant past, but I think it's important that we learn to live with it. And it's very normal to experience anxiety, but it's very normal, but we just need to keep it in perspective for sure. It's also really important that we keep informed, because media is our friend, but it's also important that we don't overconsume, right? And social media calls it doom scrolling, and that's exactly what it is. The more that you just feed into bad news and just over-consuming, the more that's just going to contribute to that fear and anxiety that we really want to move past. So it's great to be informed. The media is our friend, but just keep a limit on that and just move forward with staying well and happy. We're beyond a lot of the things that we were facing a few years ago, so that's encouraging as well. And also focus on what's in your control. Right? That's all that we can do at this point in time. We just need to live our lives, and self-care is also very important. Instead of just worrying about this and that, let's just go out and have fun, because for a few years we haven't been able to have fun. Things are open now. Let's just go out and have fun. Start to begin the routines that you had before, and just socialize and be with your family, and try not to worry about what's going on all around when you listen to overconsume, right? Just move forward.
Definitely, and it can be really hard.
Yes.
There's a lot of people struggling for all sorts of different reasons coming out of the pandemic. What kind of tips do you have for individuals that maybe are struggling with that protection/fear mindset with everything that's been thrown at us? What tips do you have for them?
So move at your own pace, right? There could be some people that are just, let's go, lockdowns are over, let's just go back and live our lives. And then there's others that are still quite fearful. So just move at your own pace. Don't let anyone influence you. If you're still not ready to go to large gatherings, don't, but just move at your own pace. And don't be influenced or shamed by people that are telling you, hey, come on, the pandemic's over, right? Just move at your own pace. And pay attention to public health and what they're telling you and all that, but just move at your own pace and do what feels right for you, right? It's really hard to let this go. I mean, I'm even talking from my own personal experience. I'm moving past it for sure, because we have to, but there's that fear. That's fair. You're standing someone in line at the show, I get it. We all get it. We understand it.
Absolutely. And I feel like there was a lot of firsts for us going into this, right? And I think even coming out, there's firsts for a lot of people discussing mental health, because a lot of us were so used to going out and about in our day.
Exactly.
And I'm curious, as we're discussing people getting used to kind of getting back into society, if people are experiencing kind of, mental health issues in their own personal life, maybe for the first time, do you have any advice of how they can get comfortable with speaking to people about something like this?
Yes, and one thing, if there is a silver lining, mental health definitely came to the forefront, right? So everybody's mental health was impacted one way or another. Either if you were already living with mental health problems, or this came about as a result of the lockdowns and the isolation and the fear and anxiety. It's really important that we know that mental health is on the forefront, and there really is no shame in talking about any mental health concerns that could have developed over these past 3 years, right? There's no shame in that. So if people feel the need to talk to someone, we recommend that people do. A lot of services have been amped. There's a lot of online supports that were created during the pandemic, because everybody was in lockdown and we were doing what we could to help our people. So there's a lot of online supports that people can access if they don't still feel uncomfortable going to a gathering, an office or anything like that. But, don't be afraid to come forward and talk about any mental health concerns that you have, because we all know that the pandemic definitely wreaked havoc on people's mental health, for sure.
And from a slightly different angle, somebody maybe that it's not you personally, but a family member or friend that is struggling, that has that fear. What kind of tips do you have maybe for them to kind of assist in helping that person along their journey? They're struggling.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, family members have all been affected, even the ones that, when the kids were locked down and doing online learning, right? We were getting a lot of calls from family members. Like, I do family support as well under my purview of my position. And the amount of family calls I was getting were triple, right? It's just, so basically, you cannot help others unless you help yourself. So try to find that balance, because everybody was always home with everyone and there was not that balance or that outlet. So self-care, find that balance, find that outlet, do social activities as well, so that you have a bit of breather, so that you in turn can support your family members to get through this as well. Yeah.
We have about a little less than 2 minutes. I'd love if you could discuss a little bit about Move for Your Mood participation. I feel
that's
like
coming up. That's coming up. Actually, that's today. It kicked off today. So the Canadian Mental Health Association National has partnered with Participation. This is their second year. So instead of really focusing on, kind of the negative aspects of Blue Mondays, they're trying to take a slant to it, saying you can improve. It doesn't have to be a Blue Monday. You don't have to experience the winter blues, similar to what this program is trying to do. So we all know that activity and self-care is just terrific in helping you get through the winter blues and making it to spring. So Move for Your Mood is a campaign that started today, and it goes until the end of January 31st. And it's basically encouraging you to do activity and self-care for the next few weeks to help you through this winter blues stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lill. And if somebody wanted to reach out to talk to CMHA, how would they do that?
So our phone number here in Brant County is 519-752-2998. And we hope to hear from you if you need help, because there is no shame in seeking help.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you here.
My pleasure.
Coming up next, we're going to be speaking with Stephanie Dinsmore, and we're really looking forward to continuing our conversation about mental health today.
We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Patini, the host of the RTV quiz show, the hottest show on television. It's the hilarious quiz show where you, the viewers, play for valuable non-existent prizes. It's got great trivia, fun facts, and a lot of laughs, all blended together in a perfect cocktail of edutainment. So join us Wednesdays at 7:30 right here on Rogers TV. Nice.
Get a little messy while having a whole lot of fun. Mindful Makers explores the world around you and inspires you to think outside the box. Join Agnes and her friends as they share crafty projects and talk to local artists. Mindful Makers, Mondays at 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
I don't care what the law is. I will never be a slave. That word, I hate it. It rests on my tongue like rot.
Peter, how does it feel to get paid for your work?
There are rumors freedom's coming for us all.
Freedom, you know that's all I want.
Chloe, careful. Real men would rather sell you across the river to America than let you go free.
Then I'll run.
I've run before. Maybe this time for good.
No! No! Just get her into a boat. No!
Chloe! Chloe, no!
Word of Chloe Cooley's resistance led to Canada's first legislation limiting slavery. After 200 years, slavery was abolished in Canada in 1834.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, some people used the A word. They called it an accident, but it wasn't. An accident implies that no one was at fault. But when someone impaired by alcohol and/or drugs chooses to drive, they're fully responsible for the crash that can result. So please, for the memory of my brother DJ and the thousands of families whose lives have been shattered by impaired drivers, let's drop the A word.
A crash caused by impaired driving is not an accident.
Welcome back to KickBack. I'm your host, Dre Peo, here with my friend, Ben Strasser, and we are here to tell you everything you need to know about mental health on this today. Before we get into our guests, I would love, Ben, if you can just talk about a little bit what we've been discussing today and introduce our next guest.
So today we're talking, this first hour, we've got a number of topics to cover throughout today. We're doing this for 6 hours, so buckle up. Get back. We're going to have a break in a little bit again, but we have two lovely guests joining us here today from Mindful Path Counselling. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie and Jodie.
Thank you.
We're diving right into trauma after the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first question that we wanted to ask was, what sort of post-pandemic trauma are people dealing with and facing right now?
Yeah, that's super helpful. So it ranges anything from anxiety to increased stress, increased health anxiety specifically, so people re-entering their community. Are you masking? Are you not masking? Mm-hmm. Relationship issues are huge. The increase in marriage and couples counseling, the referrals that we're getting is significant, and especially our youth. We've noticed a huge increase in our young people coming in for counseling, and often how we approach it is we would love if the family can support that youth for a first appointment. We want to find out what's happening in the home. How can the family support that youth? So those are really the big key pieces that we've been noticing.
The other thing I was going to say too is that our trauma is stored in our body, and a lot of people believe it's stored in our brains. Right. And so therefore we can't do counseling with and ignore the body. We have to do some psychosomatic work to ensure that we're working with all of these inner child pieces, the trauma stuff, and all that stuff that came up throughout the pandemic as well.
And what does that look like for somebody that maybe is watching right now and is like, you know what, that is really resonating with me. What does that look like if they were to give you a call?
And we really hope that does resonate with people. Jodie and I collectively, we take it as a bottom-up approach where we notice some therapies use a top-down approach. So the bottom-up approach is we look at how is the mind and the body connected, what's happening for that person, both in their mind, like with their thought process, but also in their body. What are they experiencing? So one of the books that I was just reading was what has happened to you. So like what's happened as a child, like in your youth, and what's happening inside of you is super important, because what happens inside of us also plays out in how we, communicate, how I can connect with you, maybe behaviors and reactions or responses that I have. So it's super important to address all of those pieces in therapy, and that's kind of that trauma-informed approach that we take.
Yeah, we're also looking at inner child work too. So like in those formative years, what has happened to you? What's going on for you? Even something as little as invalidation of self or thoughts, and how that then impacts you moving forward as an adult as well.
Do you guys have any tips in terms of assessment or self-assessment? Maybe someone's watching this and they're like, oh wow, this really appeals to me. They didn't realize that maybe this is something that would benefit them, how they can maybe look within themselves and help diagnose something like this.
Yeah, so I think it's important for people just to do kind of like a self check-in, even once or twice every day for 1 minute. How am I feeling? So what's going on in my body? Is my heart racing? Am I sweating like I am right now?
We all are, don't worry.
What's happening in my thought process? Am I having self-judgments that are coming up before I go to school, before I do my presentation? So what are those pieces that are happening to you? you, and maybe making note of it. Is there a difference or a pattern over the course of the week? Is it that specific day? And if someone's noticing, okay, this is happening, you know, for quite a few days, a period of time, reach out to us. That's what we're here to support you with.
Yeah, and who can't say that they've dealt with something in their life, right? I mean, life is hard. And so who can't say they've dealt with that? So even if it's not inner child, even if it's not something during those formative years, you know, we also do frontline responding trauma work too. So for police, firefighters, those sorts of things. So, you know, everybody can benefit from counseling.
Right. And I know one thing, just to touch on what you were just talking about, mine is, and it took me forever to figure it out, mine is, if I get stressed and anxious, I start to clean. And it's just mindless, it's mindless organization of like tweaking stuff and
or is it mindfulness?
Or is it mindfulness, right? Because everything's being put back in its place.
That's right.
And that's what we want people to kind of look inside and question, like, am I doing this because it's helpful, I'm de-stressing when I'm doing this, or am I doing this maybe to avoid something when I'm experiencing a thought, a feeling?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Yeah. I know, Jodie, before we started, you mentioned you wanted to talk about the difference between trauma therapy and like regular therapy. Is that the right terminology for that?
I think any creative healing is important. So I think incorporating art, music, animals, inner child pieces, anything creative is really helpful. And so therefore in trauma therapy, or the specialized trauma therapy that we're providing, we really take that creative route to really get that inner child out again, and then reparent that inner child and work on some of those strategies that our parents just didn't know, and trying to rebuild some of that. So it is different in that we look at the holistic person and not just the cognitions or that sort of thing. So we're looking at how is the body stored it, what is the brain doing, and we combine all of that together and try to work on it with the unique experience of the individual. So no two people are alike, so we have to make sure that we're making it suitable to the people we're working with.
Definitely.
And you guys have mentioned earlier and just recently now about, you know, the physical aspect of it. I'm curious, you know, what does actual therapy look like? What sort of things are you doing to incorporate the physical during these therapy sessions?
Yeah, it could depend on the person. Again, it's unique to the individual. We might do things like a visualization, you know, where are you experiencing like the discomfort or the pain. Some people notice it in their shoulders or in their feet. Some people, especially men, we find walk and talk therapy is really helpful. So getting movement with the individual, with the client while we're talking about some of these pieces.
Reiki,
yoga.
Yeah,
we're
we've
doing
incorporated
some Reiki.
A number of different things in our trauma program that has it all together.
Yeah, so that'll be a 10-week program. It'll be an outpatient program where we do incorporate individual, group counseling. There'll be a self-study that we're calling it, so people can take extra tips and tricks and incorporate that on their own time. But we'll also be doing yoga, Reiki, some actual physical components of the program.
That's cool. And you mentioned too about like parents didn't have those skills. And I think that parents can, as a new parent, I can really relate to that. And like KickBack takes on a whole new meaning now. But what can you recommend to parents that are maybe struggling with what they're dealing with on a day-to-day? Because it is a lot of work with a kid.
Community. We need community. It does take a village. That's a real thing. We still see so many different cultures practicing this, and yet we live in such an individualist world. And as a result, it means isolation and silos, and that creates that anxiety, that stress. We need that village. We need that connectedness. We need our own tools of how to deal with some of this stuff from our own childhood. As soon as I had a child, that triggered tons of stuff from my childhood. And so I think that, you know, just really getting your own support system, whether it's your own counseling, you know, exercise, those sorts of things, but trying to look at how to do that yourself.
Absolutely. I think it's so important as, again, a new parent, me too. It's so important we actually get counseling and support and have our own life outside of parenting, because if the only thing that we focus on is our kids and parenting and we're not taking care of ourselves, I mean, we're going to repeat patterns, and I think it's so important that we're having these conversations today. As new parents, we can take a step back to say, okay, what can I do differently? What are the things that did happen to me and with me that I didn't really like, that do affect the behaviors and patterns and things that I do today? And what do I want to be different for my child in my relationship with my child, but also who do I want that child to become, and what skills and emotional regulation pieces do they need?
Breaking intergenerational trauma, I think, is the big piece, right?
Absolutely. We have about 30 seconds before we have to jump to a break. I'd love if you guys can just plug where everybody watching can contact you and find more information about everything.
Absolutely. So anyone can go on our website, mindfulpathcounseling.ca. You'll find a book now button, or you can schedule a consultation. Anyone who phones the clinic speaks with me directly.
Thank you so much. We have to go to commercial. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Weekly in-depth coverage of the most local stories in Stratford, Perth, Brantford, Brant, Guelph, Wellington, and the Waterloo region. Hyperlocal stories that matter to you and your community. All this and more on Your Region This Week. All local, all year round. New episodes every Friday at 7 p.m. right here on Rogers TV.
Our world is changing.
Now more than ever, we have seen firsthand the brutality of systematic racism.
Here in Canada, we can do better.
It is time to connect, commit, and change.
I'm Queen.
And I'm Aaliyah Ali, and we're inviting you to join us on Diverse and Converse.
We'll connect you with leaders from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities.
Now is the time for change.
Personal finance show that dares to ask those money questions you've always wanted to. Join Mike Bregueth when he talks with experts on all aspects of money. Money Matters with Mike Bregueth, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on Rogers TV. Coming soon to Rogers TV. Join Carolina Suarez for Tapestry Hall Style.
Can't wait to show you the latest in entertainment.
Coming soon to Rogers TV.
Heartbeat of Mother Earth, I feel you and embrace your warmth. I see you dancing through the trees. Your song floats on the summer breeze. Community, we come together. We are the voice of our ancestors. Thankful for how much you bless us. Feel the thunder in the drum. All our voices sing as one. Feel the power, feel the pride. Feel the drumbeat deep inside. Feel the boom, feel the bass. Let's let go of time and space. It'll make you dance, it'll make you sing. Ode Wegun, Wedok Wishin. The drum will lead you, take you far. Always remember who you are.
Online betting is booming. Booyah! Woo! Oh yeah! You could win big! But you could also lose. There is risk with online gambling, and that's a reality nobody's shouting about. Learn about safer play at knowtherisks.ca.
Welcome back to KickBack. I'm your host, Dre Peo, here with Ben Strasser, and today we are dedicating our program to everything related to mental health. And our next guest is going to be talking to us about different ways that we can discuss mental health and deal with mental health through our relationships.
Wonderful, and this is a face and a voice that you're going to get very familiar with today. Alison, Maratos, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
This first hour is dedicated, and the majority of the show is dedicated to what, as a collective, we just experienced with the pandemic. And we wanted to talk to you about a little bit about like how relationships were impacted over the course of the last 2-3 years.
Sure.
Yeah. So how have you seen with your counseling services? How have you seen your clients affected by this?
I think it's gone through a bit of a cycle through the pandemic, and once we were able to resume some therapy after the initial 2020 stuff, people really coming to therapy upset that some of their relationships had been damaged because of different opinions about the pandemic, and then it moved on to vaccines, and schools open, schools closed, all of these really, really charged topics. So definitely people started to question, you know, who they were spending their time with, how they were spending that time, whether it was arguing or trying to agree to disagree. So it ultimately was quite stressful for a lot of people, especially when it may have been a close relationship and they were surprised at someone's stance on something. We can all remember how difficult it was to navigate a lot of that stuff, again, also with limited information. Yeah.
And I think it was something that everybody just did, like to look at, everybody just did the best that they could with what they had at that time, right? And it was just, it's something that we've all experienced now and gone through, and the trauma that exists because of that for us as a collective.
Absolutely. And I feel like, you know, with relationships, now that things are starting to feel a little bit more normal, I'm having a lot more conversations these days with people like, hey, I haven't spoken to this person in years, like, but they're kind of nervous. How do I reach out? It's been so long, stuff has changed. Do you have any tips in terms of how someone can go about reconnecting and feeling comfortable that, you know, it's okay to reach out to somebody you haven't spoken to in a few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in your mind you need to decide whether you want that relationship, because some people say, you know what, I feel like there was a lot of damage done. I'm not sure whether we're compatible anymore. And others saying, yeah, like it's been a gap. And I think really how you're talking to yourself and your head around it, being kinder to yourself, like, oh, I'm a bad friend because I haven't talked to so-and-so or I haven't reached out. I think so many people right now are just recovering in that, getting our lives back, so to speak, activities and priorities, and really looking at where we can carve out time for friendships. And I certainly would say the best advice is, like I said, to be kinder to yourself, and also know that the other person's probably thinking the same thing. Hey, should I reach out? This feels awkward. My guess is it might feel awkward for all of 30 seconds when you realize why you were friends in the first place, when you reach out. And I think that's, kind of the inner dialogue around it is probably the biggest thing to hurdle to jump.
Definitely. And like, so everybody was now, that they all had their own lives, looking at a family, they all had their own lives, they'd go off to school, off to work, and then all of a sudden everybody had to be together for like 24/7, right? We were stuck in those situations for most families. What has that done to families that maybe led to like has there been an increase in divorce? What have you seen around that?
Yeah, definitely issues within family conflict for sure. I think you can just Google to find, divorce rates are rising now. Substance abuse became more of an issue. Domestic violence became an issue. More so than it may have been beforehand. And I think with all of those things, I think we're going to need more time to see the long-term effects. But yeah, certainly stressful being in an enclosed space with your loved ones is stressful at the best of times. I mean, people do it once a year at Christmas, but when folks were in that situation, it was pretty tough for a lot of people.
And when it comes to relationships, I'd love to discuss also, you know, children and the youth and what role they all play in all of this. Because I think, you know, as adults, maybe as we're reintegrating into kind of this new norm that we were used to from before, maybe it's a little bit easier compared to children who maybe they just were going into school at the beginning of the pandemic and they're so used to school always being remote and them not seeing their friends as much. As they're transitioning into, hopefully is what the way we're going to stay, is everyone being together. How do you feel that they can really adapt and get used to that, closeness that we're now having? Right,
and I think you've hit on it, that depending on, I think every age of stage of development has had to adjust what the norm was. I mean, young kids, we have children who just went to school for the first time, even though they're going into grade 1, as an example. I had a high schooler that is in now victory lap because he hadn't actually been in in-person school really consistently since grade 9. And he was graduating. So, and a university student who came home. So just thinking from the littles right up to the bigs, so many adjustments, and you're seeing things like anxiety cropping up in kids when they're being forced to go into regular school and not sure what this is about and not ready, to teens being angry that what's supposed to be the fun time of their life, high school, university, that was taken away from them. So it's been tough for young people. And I would say on the other end of the spectrum, the elderly. I mean, people who really tried to be enjoying their retirement and have activities lined up, all of a sudden they're home alone, isolated, or with one other person. So I think bearing that in mind, we all have so much recovering to do because we really, you know, I won't say we lost 2 years, but we really had to change the way we were functioning and our expectations of ourselves and our relationships during that time.
Right, and I know that there's a lot of people that are dealing with, maybe dealing with these feelings for the very first time coming out of this, and they kind of have that sense of something's wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. What are steps that maybe our viewers, they're experiencing this, what are some steps that they could take at home?
Right. Yeah, I would definitely say as a therapist, most of my sessions post-pandemic really often start with, I don't know what's wrong with me. I called because I don't know what's wrong with me. So people really who've never really suffered with mental health issues or just, again, self-aware enough to know they don't feel great. So there's so many things that, you know, we try in therapy to help people understand that, again, be kind to yourself as you're recovering from this. Reach out to supports, whether it's people in your world and you just want to talk about how hard this has been for you, how hard it has been to reintegrate, how hard it has been to navigate the rules, to going to formal therapy to just maybe help you understand the difficulties you had in your marriage during that time, or the concern you have as a parent for your child. Talking about it really is the best advice I can give. And for those who aren't maybe ready to talk, I also talk about journaling. Pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, just start writing what you're feeling, because as a therapist I always say it needs somewhere to go. Right. And if you're carrying it in your heart, in your head, in your whole body, it needs a place to go. So talking and writing and just putting things out there, being vulnerable, is probably the best way I could say to let's all recover by being vulnerable.
Absolutely. And we're going to jump to a commercial break shortly, but before we come back with you and continue our conversation, I'd love if you can just plug, you know, where people can contact you, and maybe they can take a look at some of your websites while we jump to the break.
Sure. So our practice is Maratos Counselling. We're at maratoscounseling.com, and we're on Facebook and Instagram. We're a group practice. We have several therapists who offer all types of different therapy with different age groups, and we're all working on post-pandemic stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to jump to a break, and we're going to continue today on Kickback. I'm Dre Peo, and we're going to jump to a break, and we'll see you shortly.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Patini, the host of the RTV quiz show, the hottest show on television. It's the hilarious quiz show where you, the viewers, play for valuable non-existent prizes. It's got great trivia, fun facts, and a lot of laughs, all blended together in a perfect cocktail of edutainment. So join us Wednesdays at 7:30 right here on Rogers TV. Nice.
Life can be stressful. I know that. We're here to help you. Simple, easy recipes, amazing guests. At Home with Chef D, Wednesdays, 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Welcome to Tapestry Hall Style. I'm Carolina Suarez, and I can't wait to show you the latest in entertaining, food, and fashion. Catch us in Tapestry Hall Style, coming soon on Rogers TV.
Long way from Nashville, and mama, I'll tell you that. Performed from Montreal to Boston to Los Angeles. But Toronto, that's my chosen home. Sure, when I'm walking down Yonge Street, I see some funny people who have the nerve to point the finger at me. And grin and smile and whisper. My song was #2 on local radio. Sold 10,000 in Toronto alone. Turned down Ed Sullivan because they asked me to remove my makeup. Wouldn't do American Bandstand because of their segregation policies. I was just being me. Never tried to explain myself to anyone. And besides, none of that to worry, Jackie, because I know I look good. Got a new way of loving, baby. Thought I want to teach it to you.
Jackie Shane was a pioneer transgender soul singer A central figure in the Toronto R&B scene, she helped shape what we know as the Toronto sound.
On the Art Trail with Joanne returns for season 2. We have a terrific lineup coming up for you. We will be interviewing folks like gallery owners, musicians, a theater impresario, a master Japanese calligrapher, and much more. So watch On the Art Trail with Joanne, Saturdays at 7.
Clubs, leagues, and courts in every province and territory across Canada, squash is the sport for wall-to-wall fun, fitness, and friendship. From coast to coast to coast. Learn to play and you'll want to do it every day. Squash. Play inside the box.
Welcome back to KickBack, our episode dedicated to everything mental health. We are continuing our conversation today with Alison Maratos, and before the break, we were discussing, different ways that different people are dealing with this and managing the relationships through coming out of the pandemic. And something I wanted to mention was we discussed a little bit about children and the youth coming out of the pandemic with this. I'm curious, as a parent, are there different things that you can be looking for to see, hey, maybe my child can really benefit from speaking to someone. Maybe they're dealing with something that they're not telling me about.
Right, for sure. Parents know their kids the best, right? So looking for clues that they might be acting differently. Are they crying before school and hesitant to go? Are they getting tummy aches, headaches, having difficulty getting along with peers? And again, this can be from little kids, right, up to high school, even university, even kids who have words. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's really hard to really pinpoint, again, the I don't know what's wrong with me kind of statement. So always good idea to talk. I've said throughout this, dinner table conversations are really important. And that's where parents can normalize what's been going on. Even, I think erroneously, lots of people think, oh, this is over, we're back to normal. But what is normal? Again, that statement, the new normal. So trying to look at what that means for your family is really important. And if you have a child who doesn't seem to be sure about what that normal is, because again, maybe they're too young to remember what pre-pandemic life was, it's important to talk about it. And also talk about the fact that we as parents struggle and have struggled with this as well through all of this, that it's not just them, it's not just they're flawed, it's all of us who throughout this have had times where we're not sure what we're feeling, how we're feeling it, what to do to feel better, and really fostering that dialogue as a family, that again, that it's a safe place to talk about what they're worried about.
Right, and I think that with this, with KickBack, one of my favorite pieces that ever came out of the 5 years, this is now the 5th year, that we've been doing this, was that encouragement of conversations. And we had some feedback saying that this was the first, we were all sitting around dinner, we had you on in the background, and it was the first time ever that my dad opened up about how he was feeling and what he was dealing with. And then it transitioned around the table from mom to the kids, and it was that first time that conversation started.
Right.
Do you have any tips for people to maybe just initiate that conversation, whether it be with their spouse, their friends, or the kids around the dinner table?
Absolutely. And I love the dinner table conversation, the going around the table so nobody gets off the hook.
Yeah.
Just as simple sometimes as what was the best thing that happened today, what was the worst thing that happened today. If you're noticing as a parent that your child seems to be suffering and your hunch is that it might be pandemic related, sometimes it is good to open the door yourself and say, you know what, I've been really worried about, like we said before the break, seeing this friend that I haven't seen in 2.5 years, and it makes me feel really worried and anxious. You don't need to give any more information than that, because I bet the little one is going to jump on that and maybe talk about that they feel the same, or at least they hear that it's okay that someone I love and trust might feel the same way. So again, using the opportunity to talk about the feelings that you're experiencing as a parent appropriately, and probably guessing that your child might be having struggles with too.
Well, and especially because parenting, it involves so many firsts, right? Like it's all firsts, and you're just doing what you can, when you can, how you can, and like sometimes it's hard to know whether it's something that is pandemic related that we're dealing with, or whether it's just a standard part of the child growing up. What is that? And deciphering the difference. At what point would you say it's a good point to reach out to somebody, a professional like yourself?
Yeah, you made a good point, Ben, because a lot of parents have struggled with what the normal stage of development stuff is versus pandemic. And again, talking about it. I mean, I'm a little biased. I think reaching out for therapy at any time is a great idea. I have many people who come to therapy just as a check-in, just for their mental health like they would their physical health. And I think that's another piece of dialogue, is normalizing that therapy is okay, and it's not scary, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's actually taking care of an important part of your body, an important part of who you are. So I think that's the first thing. And again, if the kiddo says, yeah, no, this is terrible and scary, you know, we're so lucky most of the time that we have Google at our disposal. Are there videos you can find that maybe talk about what therapy's about, or going to therapy? I mean, we all see it in movies. All I would say is, I say to most people, I don't have a couch you lie on. That's the common question. The movie stereotypes, but really, yeah, just again, talking and finding a therapist that fits your kid, fits you. I think that's important. We want people who feel comfortable with us as therapists and want to work with us. If the way I communicate isn't for you, or you want to see a guy, I'm not offended. I would rather connect you with somebody who fits what you are interested in. And the same thing goes with kids. Communication style is key for them to want to go to therapy and have that safe space.
We've talked a little bit about, you know, with our children, we've talked about with our family. Something that I'd love to also discuss is, you know, bringing these conversations up in the workplace with a coworker, or someone maybe that you do business with, that maybe you see them so often, but you maybe see them struggling, but you're not sure if they know how to deal with it. You may be watching the show saying, hey, this reminds me of someone that I'm working with. Is there a different way you would go about bringing this up? Because again, this isn't maybe someone that you're living with, or someone that's your child. I would imagine it's a different conversation.
Right, because the level of intimacy is different. And I think we're still seeing that in workplaces, people who are reluctantly moving back to being in an office versus being online. So many people were very happy with that situation. Other people are like, thank God I'm back. So that's sometimes a great place to start. How are you feeling about this new situation? And how's that working for you? I'm feeling blank. Again, when you're wanting to check in with someone, sometimes it is a nice door opener that said, I'm feeling really worried about this new policy, or, you know, how have you been and how are you feeling? You know, it's, you know, how did you make out during the pandemic? Catch me up on your life over the past couple of years. Just letting someone know you care in the workplace, other than just focusing on the work issues, because yeah, some of these conversations, and we all kind of, I think we're getting better, but we've kind of all forgotten sometimes when we first got back how to interact. You know, that we can, now we don't have, I was joking in the gym this morning, the tape down the 4 boxes where we were working out. I mean, literally don't pass this line. I mean, life is getting back to quote unquote normal, but I think we have to all understand that normal is different because of what we've all experienced. And that piece of like, knowing that nothing's certain. We knew that before the pandemic, but we sure as heck know now that things can change on a dime. So having conversations about what's changed and how you're looking at the world is a nice way to kind of check in on somebody else.
Wonderful, and thank you again for joining us, Alison. Before, we got about 45 seconds left. How can people contact you?
Sure. So we are a group practice, therapy practice in Brantford. It's maratoscounseling.com. You can check out our website. We've got multiple therapists. You can read all about us and decide which therapist you're interested in seeing, and give us a call or an email, and we'd be happy to chat.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to continuing the conversation with everyone watching today. about mental health and different things that we can do as a community to support one another and to just make this, a part of a normal conversation.
Right,
It should
exactly.
be something that if anyone needs help, that we're here for you. So we're here to brighten your day here at KickBack, and we will be back after the break with Alicia Lawson to discuss things about Brant Mental Health Solutions. We'll be back right after the break.
Weekly in-depth coverage of the most local stories in Stratford Perth, Brantford Brant, Guelph Wellington, and the Waterloo region. Hyperlocal stories that matter to you and your community. All this and more on your region this week. All local, all year round. New episodes every Friday at 7 p.m. right here on Rogers TV.
Get a little messy while having a whole lot of fun. Mindful Makers explores the world around you and inspires you to think outside the box. Join Agnes and her friends as they share crafty projects and talk to local artists. Mindful Makers, Mondays at 6 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Blood in the urine is the most common symptom of bladder cancer. Don't ignore this warning sign, not even once.
My name is Chase Nicholas. I am a Mi'kmaq hockey player. Growing up, I always remember my family talking about the Mi'kmaq as the creators of the game of hockey. In grade 7, I did research on Mi'kmaq hockey sticks as the first sticks of the NHL. I found a Mi'kmaq hockey stick made in 1917, the same year the NHL was formed. I was surprised to find out the very stick I was holding was made by my great-great-grandfather, Alexander Cope. In 1934, an elder known as Old Joe Cope wrote a letter to the Halifax Herald claiming the Mi'kmaq created hockey. I found out later that I am a direct descendant of Old Joe Cope. There was a time when Mi'kmaq children were torn from their families and not allowed to speak their language, losing their words and stories. But the stories are coming back to us. Stepping on the ice, I take pride knowing the roots of the game of hockey stem from my ancestors in the Mi'kmaq Nation.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
In Studio and On the Road invites you to find out what's happening in your own backyard. From tasty treats to interesting people and places, In Studio and On the Road, Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Welcome back to KickBack, our day dedicated to everything related to mental health. Our next guest is Alicia Lawson, and today we've been talking about all sorts of things related to mental health, but one thing I would really love to touch upon is the positives that have come out of the pandemic. The big topic has been the new norm of the pandemic, getting back to reality, and I'm curious, what positives have we seen coming out of this crazy past few years?
I think definitely a lot more people reaching out for help and normalizing the conversation around mental health because most people deal with it. So it's people come into the office very anxious, very stressed out about having those conversations. They're very personal conversations, and that's one of the first things I try to do is normalize it for people because it is something most people experience, just don't talk about.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Do you think that it was because we were all brought together so tightly for such an extended period of time that all of a sudden those things were brought to the forefront, which increased them? Or why do you think that is, that all of a sudden people were more willing to ask for help?
Well, I think some people really struggled through, and people generally don't tend to come to counseling until they've kind of hit a bit of a brick wall, which is unfortunate because you can really avoid a lot of the mental health struggles that you encounter by actually just seeking help earlier. But you know, there's a lot of kids too, like young kids. I work with a couple kids who their life has been entirely the pandemic. And so we see a lot of that impact on them in terms of just like a fear of germs and all kinds of things like that. I think people were stuck with family members too that were maybe not the most healthy relationships, and things coming to the forefront there too. So. Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't realize what school can be a very safe place for people, right? Like it's not necessarily like, anyways. That
absolutely.
Yeah.
And with Brant Mental Health Solutions, I'm curious, like, what the process is like working with you guys. Maybe somebody's hearing this for the first time, they'd love to contact you, but they're just kind of hesitant because they don't know, they don't want to do anything they're not maybe comfortable with. Can you kind of eliminate some of that fear that they might have?
Absolutely. So we do 15-minute consultations with clients, and I think that's really important. And they can do that with more than one therapist to get an idea of who they might be most comfortable speaking with. Research shows that is kind of one of the most important things in terms of being successful in therapy, is having someone you're really comfortable with. I always just kind of start out with I go through the, things that I have to say, but then, it's important that people know if your therapist asks you a question that you're not comfortable answering, you don't have to. Like, this is very client-centered. It's about the client and what they're looking to get out of it, and I usually ask them what they're here for, what they're hoping to accomplish by coming in for therapy, and I just really try to create a really comfortable environment. I do have a couch that people can spread out on and have before, so that's kind of nice. It's just nice to have, for them to know that I'm just a human being just like they are and no different, and it's just a safe space for people to be able to talk.
Right. I think that's really important too, because I've had conversations with people about, hey, I'm thinking of reaching out to somebody, and the immediate reaction is, I really don't want to tell them this, or I don't want to talk about this. And I think that from what it sounds like is, if you're not comfortable with something, you don't have to bring it up, and we can talk about something else that you are passionate about discussing.
Absolutely. I think it's very much about what the client's needs are and what they're comfortable with, especially when you're in a first appointment with someone you've never met before and trying to talk about really personal stuff. That's challenging. I would say that it's good for a therapist to know as much as they can about you, because if there's pieces missing, then it's a little bit more difficult to do some of the work that might be really helpful. But again, I always encourage my clients, if you don't want to answer that question, let's move on. We can, come back to that 10 sessions from now, or whatever the case might be. It's not something we have to I don't break down doors and
Well, and I think sometimes it's as simple as just having somebody that's unbiased about whatever situation it is, because then it's just somebody that's not going to react emotionally to it, right? Or like has any past experiences with you to be able to bring something else up or bring it into the conversation. It's just somebody to listen to that's just there to listen to you, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I do tell clients too, like, if they are looking for something specific that they'd like to work on, or, if there's a specific kind of pathway in therapy that we were going to take, clients really lead all of that. So whether we work, specifically on cognitive behavioral therapy, or whether we just talk and it's a safe space for them to offload what they're carrying with them and not have that judgment. I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything you can do to kind of prepare for a conversation with you? If it's your first time, is there any notes you should be preparing, anything you should do before you kind of come in to speak with you?
Yeah, there's nothing you should do, except for just take a deep breath and relax and just try to be comfortable and realize that we're all human, and really that is my priority, is to make it a safe space for people. Clients do come in with notes they've made or journals, things that they would like to share. So I have clients who will come in with like a list of things they're experiencing in terms of symptoms, both physical and mental. It's really up to the client. Again, it's very client-centered, client-led, and whatever feels good for them is what I would suggest.
Awesome. And Alicia, can you share a little bit about your own personal journey with mental health and maybe how that led you to where you are now?
Yeah. So I've always wanted to be in a helping profession. I was in finance for about 16 years before I went into mental health. And I actually started taking my master's degree prior to my own personal significant experience with mental health. Years ago, I was in a pretty deep depression after a divorce. I think people don't take the time to grieve divorce, which is a really key thing that I think is important for people to know. And I just was in a really dark place. And when I came out of it, and so I took time off of my degree and then came out of it, started up my degree again, and I thought, I just want to give people hope that, there is recovery, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you don't see it, it's there. And it is important for people to understand that mental health is multifaceted, and it's difficult sometimes to kind of keep, pinpoint what the issues are. I think someone was talking earlier about physical versus mental and all that kind of stuff. There's so many factors that play into it, but there are definitely so many solutions and so many opportunities to help people. It's just a little bit of trial and error sometimes. So, yeah.
And I love that you said you kind of, needed to step away for a second just to kind of reassess everything. And I think that's something that, we don't talk enough about. I get so many people discussing with me about, their job. Everything is very stressful, and I think we sometimes don't think, maybe it's time to step back a little bit.
Yeah,
I need a break.
Can take a break.
Yeah, we don't think about taking a break. And so I'm curious, how often do you see that come up when you're speaking to people?
All the time. Yeah, and I think that people's, conversation about this is starting to change, but there's still some, social stigma and social messaging around, like, nose to the grindstone, all those kinds of wonderful sayings that
hustle, hustle, hustle.
Yeah. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's okay to take a break for mental health reasons. I took a year leave from my degree in order to take care of myself. And that didn't mean that I wasn't going back to it. It just meant that I needed to get myself into a better place to be able to do it. And I think that's really important. It's just like, you break your leg, it's something physical that people can see, but no one would ask you to go to work with a broken leg, especially if you've got a manual labor job, right? Mental health is really not that much different. It's just a pain that's a little bit more intangible and difficult to see, so it's harder to address, I guess, in that way. But yeah.
And Alicia, can you share how people can get in touch with you at Brant Mental Health Solutions?
Yeah, so we have our website. You can call us at the front desk, and again, feel free to book a 15-minute consultation. Just test it out and see what your comfort level is. You don't have to dive in with a first one-hour session, and it just gives you kind of a little bit of a taste of what we're about and what we can do for you. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. And thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of Kickback. I'm Dre Peo, and this is my friend, Ben Strasser.
Happy to be here. This has been good. Back in the armchairs.
Back in the saddle.
Yeah. And coming up next in the next hour, we're going to be talking about specifically youth and childhood and mental health and all aspects of that. So we're very excited to get started on that. Thank you, Alicia, and we will be right back.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
I was born and raised in Musqueam First Nation territory by my mother, who spoke Huntkaminam to me. As a child, I ceased using my mother tongue.